The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. My guest today, author, actor, playwright, composer, comedian, and probably more, Steve Allen.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi. You know, we live and work in a time when probably one of the greatest trends is specialization, where things seem to get narrower and narrower. Mm-hmm. You are obviously swimming upstream.
Yes. I can take no credit for that. I think it is, by it I mean the versatility factor, is essentially genetic. I never went to versatility school, nor for that matter am I trained at anything I do. I just was able to do it. It's like being able to blink or sneeze.
Do you give a lot of the credit to your mother?
Nobody's ever asked me that before. The answer is I'm not sure. My mother was wonderfully witty. All the members of her family, in fact, were witty. It was a kind of a sarcastic Irish wit, side of the mouth, muttered stuff, very funny. Milton Berle was once kind enough to refer to my mother as the funniest woman in vaudeville, and I believe he was right about that. But my mother was not pleased at all when she began to get the idea I might end up in the same industry. She wanted me to be a civil engineer. I don't think she knew what that was, but she'd met one once and he had a nice vest or something, so she wanted me to be that. So it's hard to say that she should be credited. I just talk like all the Donahues, my mother's family. Whether they deserve credit for that, I don't know.
Well, I was thinking from what I know, you're kind of the classic born in the trunk. Your mother, Belmontrose, in vaudeville. You moved around a lot, and whether that, as a child, whetted your appetite, your curiosity for all things.
It well could have. I went to 18 schools. It was a sort of a gypsy existence. So there were undoubtedly environmental influences in our every day of all of our lives. But I think genetics is all alone at the head of the list as to why all of us become what we become.
I was thinking, I've read you have sometimes as many as 50 projects going at once. Your life is littered with little tape recorders that you make notes into. And
yes.
It made me wonder just what you were like as a kid.
I kept saying, where's my tape recorder? But they hadn't invented it yet. Nobody knew what I was talking about. I haven't added any new activities since I was about 12, I guess. Everything I do now for a living, all the books and the songs and the whatever the heck, was part of the childhood pattern. In school, I was acting in the school play and writing poems or humor for the school newspaper, making speeches in the school assembly, playing the piano in the school band, all that sort of stuff. So again, the versatility pattern was there right from early life.
Somebody once described that whole syndrome as every time the circus comes to town, you want to be a clown. No, where you're just attracted immediately to whatever passes you by, and you think, well, that looks interesting.
I guess I was a normal American child in that general regard. It's odd that my early ambitions had nothing to do with show business. And they were pretty normal for the age bracket. At the age of about 8, I probably wanted to be a cowboy because I saw cowboy movies. Then when I was a little older and saw slightly at least more practical, I wanted to be a journalist. In the high school and college stage, I was a journalistic specialist and went to college on a journalism scholarship, that sort of thing. So after I got past, maybe at the age of 16, wanted to be a baseball pitcher. When I became practical, journalism was the field I was consciously headed for, and I have written a lot for papers over the years, but that's not primarily how I make my living.
You said you didn't intend to end up in show business, but in show business you certainly did end up. How did that happen?
It was a series of accidents. Almost everything that's ever happened to me has been either, as I said earlier, genetic or accidental, social accidents. I was going to a high school in Phoenix, Arizona, in my last year, and one day the journalism teacher held up a piece of paper. There were about 12 of us in the editorial room. He said, how many of you have not as yet decided where you're going to college next year? And only I and one other fellow held up our hand. So he talked to us too, and he said, have a one-year journalism scholarship to Drake University. Either you guys want it. If you both do, you want to flip a coin. So the other kids said, no, I don't want to go to Drake. So I said, I'll take it. And Drake had a very good journalism school. So I had that training for a year, but they also had an excellent radio school. This was before television, of course. So because that was a snap course, I took it for that dumb reason, really. I wouldn't have taken biology on that basis or chemistry. But I knew I had a reasonably acceptable voice, and you don't have to be too brilliant to read stuff off a piece of paper, so I did that for a year. And it turned out that it was very easy to get a job in radio at that time, and not that easy to get a job at a paper.
From radio, you went on to television, and really you worked in television when it was still wet behind the ears.
Yeah, it was a thrilling, exciting time. By now we're talking about the early 50s and late 40s a little bit. A great time to get into the business. First of all, you didn't have to have anything on the ball at all. They suddenly opened up stations all over the country.
Unlike now.
Well, now you do have to have, there's a lot of competition now. For every job, there are 19 people that want it. In those days, it was the other way around. You could have almost any job you wanted if you didn't drink and, didn't hold up banks or whatever. So I found I encountered no difficulty. In fact, I was drawn into television. It was an enormous vacuum, pulling in at that time hundreds and hundreds of radio people, film people, failed Broadway actors, announcers who were overweight or whatever kinds of people. And for the first few years, there wasn't that much talent in the business. And a lot of those people were finally shaken out, and people did get a little better. And finally, you had people like Jackie Gleason and Milton Berle and real professionals in the business. But a lot of us were just new kids in that early day, and it was thrilling. I loved every minute of it.
It must have been wonderful. There must have been a great deal of openness to experiment, really, to try anything.
Yeah, when I started what is now known as The Tonight Show, there were no instructions, whatever. They just wanted me to fill up 90 minutes. I had no help, whatever, from the local station. They had already seen me work, so they knew I would do the same kind of thing. And the show was just started in '53. It was local for a little over a year, and then because it was a hit in the New York area, they put it on the full network and simply changed the name of it from the Steve Allen Show to the Tonight Show. But it was like going to a party every night. The production offices and the onstage activity was very much like that of a college fraternity house. We were all good buddies. We all liked each other. We still do. That whole gang and I are still personal friends. So it was a delightful time to work.
Did you have hopes then, ideas, aspirations about what this medium could be?
Yes and no. I was so busy turning out my 90 minutes a night, plus songs and books and all the other stuff I do, that I wasn't very introspective or analytical about either myself or the industry. I sensed what any dodo could sense, the potential of television, but even that sense was pretty vague around the edges. I was from the first disappointed that, I don't know, maybe 75% of what I saw on television was, as I've called it, junk food for the mind. And I thought, hey, we all ought to be doing better than that. There was at the time a gentleman running NBC called Pat Weaver, Sylvester Weaver, and he sent a memo around to all of us who were doing programs, not only permitting us to occasionally put something with a little meat on its bones into our program fare, but encouraging us to do so, which was marvelous. I don't think you'd see many of those memos today. They try to keep you away from that now, unless you're doing a documentary show or something of the sort. So whenever I wanted to recommend a serious book or have a serious interview, I did mostly comedy nonsense on talk shows, for example. But occasionally we would have a totally non-comic segment, and the network never interfered at all. We did shows on the mafia, we did shows on the drug problem, we did discussions of the political blacklist. We did in 2 instances, and this again was on the Tonight Show, the talk show. We did 2 half-hour dramas, complete. I mean, they could have been lifted out and put on at 8 o'clock on a network. So we had total freedom to do whatever we wanted. It was really exciting for that reason, too.
Has television gone forward or backward since those days?
Both. What is worse now is, if possible, even worse than the bad stuff then. For example, the filth, the vulgarity, the obscenity, the lack of respect for the traditional varieties, as we say. That's certainly not progress. But in many ways, television is much better. Starting with whatever night it was, 1971 or whatever year, that All in the Family went on the air. The art of the situation comedy took a, thinking of cliches all the time, quantum leap, big deal with my mouth, into the future. So that from then on, that point on, the best of the sitcoms, not the run-of-the-mill ones, but the best of the sitcoms were markedly superior to the sitcoms of the 50s. Sometimes people who don't think very well say, wait a minute, you mean better than The Honeymooners or Lucy? No, I didn't say that. Those were great shows. But name me 9 more, and you can't. You know, the rest of them were dumb stuff like Leave It to Beaver and, you know, forget it. But now there are, I mean, the last 20 years or so, there have been marvelous sitcoms. Cheers is just too good for the human race. We don't deserve a show as good as Cheers. Golden Girls, Cosby, a lot of great sitcoms now. So in that way, it's better. Sports coverage is much better. News coverage is much better. There's a lot of improvement.
So like everything in life, it's
We learn.
mixed. It's a
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag. Well, we're going to take a look at a show that received a lot of the superlatives that you just gave to other programs, and that's a clip from the Steve Allen comedy show.
Yeah, for those young people, I'll just quickly explain. That is a primetime comedy series, which I did after my 4 years on the late night thing. Then I did 4 years of primetime comedy with sketches and marvelous fellow workers. And that was the show in which we featured Don Knotts, Tom Poston, Louis Nye, Pat Harrington, Bill Dana.
Fabulous cast.
I think the best comedy cast of all time. So in this particular case, though, if it's the clip I'm thinking of, it's just myself playing 2 parts. I used to occasionally do wild characters and interview myself.
As they said on the show, hi-ho, Steve Areno. Let's take a look.
I'm not much to look at. You can say that again, Charlie. Not much to see. Oh, he did say it again. What do you mean? Yeah. But I'm glad I'm living. Well, I'm pretty surprised to hear it myself. Here we go. And happy to be. Yeah. Here we go. Watch it, please. You're not giving it the proper accompaniment. Sorry. But I've got a woman. Well, that takes a load off my mind. Sorry, now watch it there. Be careful. Crazy for me. Man, she'd have to be, you know what I mean? She's funny that way. Or she's that way and it's funny. Oh, I can't save a dollar. I'll buy that. Here we go. And what a cent. No arguments from me, Charlie. Come on. Sing. She doesn't holler. But you do, man. She doesn't laugh. Oh, come on, you go sing. Come on, here. Shut up there, you young whippersnapper. All right, sorry. She'd live in a tent. You're making me get lost, huh? That's right, I got this cold. We do live in a tent. Oh, I'm sorry. But I've got a woman. Come on. Stop with your silly asides. Never mind my asides. Stop with your silly... She's funny that way. Though she loves to work and slave for me every day. Chick should be a union member with this idiot around. She'd be so much better off if I... Yeah. Went away. Well, we all would, you know. Sorry. But why should I leave her? Why should I go? Never mind that. Just blow, that's all. Go. Come on. She'd be unhappy. And, yeah. Without me. Oh, you know. I wouldn't bet on that if I were you. Here we go. I've got a woman crazy for me. She's funny, but you're flat. Come on, knock off. That's it. Boom, time, and zip.
Steve Allen and a distinguished guest, a clip from the old Steve Allen comedy show, a show you can see on Ha.
The Ha Comedy Channel. I don't think today anybody will know why that character I did was called Stephen L. Stevens. There had been in radio in the late 1930s a singer, very formal type fellow named Thomas L. Thomas. So that was the switch.
Now, one of the things you used to like to do on that show was take guest performers and put them in kind of unorthodox settings,
Yes.
having them do things that they hadn't seen people do, like having Elvis do comedy.
Right.
Was he funny?
Anybody can be funny if you put them into if you know how to handle them. One of the not only greatest sketches on our show ever done, but in the history of comedy, one of the funniest sketches, I can say that because I was not in it. I participated in the creation of it, but it was not in it. It featured Charlton Heston. Now, if I asked you to name the 300 funniest people you can think of, Chuck's name would not automatically come up as number 7, you know. Nevertheless, it's a classic sketch. He played the part of a klutzy cowboy movie star who has to do 57 takes of one simple scene in a bar thing. Classic comedy. So to get back to Elvis, you don't ordinarily think of him in comedy in the same breath either. But since ours was a comedy show, we used everybody except somebody just did a tap dance or whatever in a comic context. I thought it would be funny, and it was, instead of having him wear the usual, black leather jacket look, to put him in Fred Astaire wardrobe. So we had him in white tie and tails, and because of the simple factor of incongruity equals humor, automatically. And then since he was going to sing Hound Dog, I thought it would be amusing to get an actual basset hound, one of those cute, mournful faces, and so that his wardrobe would match Elvis's, we put a little black top hat on him and a little black bow tie, and he looked adorable. In fact, I learned just a week ago that to this day in outside Graceland in the alley or wherever they sell souvenirs to folks who should be spending their money in better ways, one of the hot souvenirs is a little statue of the hound dog with the top hat and the black bow tie. I should get a little royalty on that, I think.
I had you to talk a bit about your thoughts on television after 40 years or so of experience. What about comedy? Has comedy gone forward or backward?
Same thing again. Comedy is both better and worse than it used to be. I wrote a piece on comedy at the request of the Atlantic Monthly magazine back around '57, and no reason to go back to that except that in the body of that article I mentioned that there were only about 50 comedians in show business at that time. And nobody ever said, boy, why don't we have more? They just said, who cares? There's got to be a number of everything, so that's how many comedians we had, roughly. Now we have over 2,000. It's a tremendous expansion, obviously. And the other main difference in comedy is that now filth is king. I do not therefore argue that if you're dirty, you're not funny. Some people are both very dirty and very funny. Some sickening jokes are nevertheless funny, so that's not the distinction we're talking about. There has always been off-color humor. It was brought to this planet by people called human beings, a troublesome lot if I ever saw one. And therefore there will always be dirty jokes, two 14-year-old kids out behind a barn or something. That's not a national problem. But when that kind of humor dominates comedy, as it now does, on the Broadway stage, in motion pictures, in record albums, in popular, lighthearted music, TV, cable, wherever you mention it, it's filth, I repeat, is king. Andrew Dice Clay filled Madison Square Garden. Bob Hope would not fill Madison Square Garden, Woody Allen would not fill Madison Square Garden. So that's bad.
There was a comment made about Andrew Dice Clay that I wanted to run by you, and I think I know how you're going to react, but he was compared to Lenny Bruce. People said, hey, Lenny Bruce was offensive.
I can't wait to get at that question. As Voltaire once said, I will defend to the death the person's right to say that, but if he says it to me, I'll hit him right in the mouth. I love Lenny Bruce. I loathe Andrew Dice Clay. The two are not in the same race. They're from two different planets. Lenny was a genius. Good luck to Andrew Dice Clay. I wish him nothing but good health, but let's see how funny he is if he gets up some night and doesn't do dirt. Let's see how many laughs he gets. I had Lenny on my shows 3 times. He was not in the least offensive. He was always brilliant. He was a philosopher, really, a social philosopher who used humor to make his points. Courageous, sometimes in poor taste, yeah. Personally self-destructive, not a saint, not a perfect human being, but an absolutely brilliant and influential, funny thinker.
It seems that one of the real key differences is the difference between being cynical or observant in that kind of sense and being just plain mean and mean-spirited.
Yeah, there is literally no defense for Clay. I wrote a piece recently at the request of the LA Times on this and got a lot of nice reaction. And among the reactions was the intelligence that Henny Youngman had just a few days earlier written a remarkably similar article for the New York Times. So I checked on that, and I was thrilled to read what Henny had said. He was attacking Clay specifically. I don't even think I mentioned the guy's name. But it is out of control now, and one unfortunate result is we are going to get censorship. It's not only from Andrew Dice Clay, there's not much that weight on his shoulders, but it's, you know, the rap people who are demeaning women and Jews and everything. It's really sickening. So you're going to get more censorship.
People can tell, and who don't know you, 2 or 3 people who may not know of your work, that there's a serious side to you, the comments that you just made.
It's this side.
It's that side there.
Yes, when I want to be serious, I look at you like this.
Okay, well, we'll have to sit that way for a bit then. I wanted to ask you, in this whole business of being so eclectic, the Renaissance man and diverse talent, whether or not that range sometimes works against your credibility. I noticed your recent TV appearances, for example, I mean, the PBS series that you've done, and
Meeting of Minds,
and Nightline, and then there's Oprah and Geraldo and my favorite, WrestleMania. And so you write a book on the Bible and morality. People say, why should I listen to this from a guy who's on WrestleMania?
Yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable question, which I not only agree should be expressed, but I encourage people to think of that. I said, you're a dummy if it doesn't occur to you to wonder, why should we listen to Steve Allen on the Bible? Maybe about getting hit in the pie with a face, or hit in the face with a pie, or whatever. But a reasonable question, and an easy one to answer. Since I am certainly not an authority on Scripture, if indeed anything, I naturally quote a great deal of the best authority in the world, for the most part Christian scholars who have devoted their lifetimes to an analysis of Scripture. So I'm just trying to get people to listen to them. That's my service. I did a somewhat similar book a couple of years back called DUMBTH, D-U-M-B-T-H, and 81 Ways to Make Americans Smarter. It had come to my attention, and has now not escaped the attention of any observant person, that the American people have gotten dumb to the point where it's internationally embarrassing. They don't know stuff at 20 when they're going to college that American 10-year-olds used to know about 30 years ago. So we're obviously going downhill fast in that regard. And again, am I an authority on that? Of course not. It would be silly to claim that I am. But I quote authorities. So that's an important service.
I understand why you write those books and do a show like The Meeting of the Minds. I guess what I don't understand is why you do WrestleMania.
Well, I make my living partly as a nut. Certainly not as a wrestler, although if you want to go a few rounds, I'll talk to you after.
What did you do on WrestleMania?
I wrestled a maniac. No, seriously. I was in a men's room, believe it or not, where we taped this particular spot with 2 wrestlers who are both Russian, or I don't know, Czech or some Eastern European ethnic background, and enormous and dangerous. What the heck I talked to them about? They just wanted me on in my capacity as a comedian. They wanted some comic, and they knew I used to announce the wrestling matches back in the late 40s in Los Angeles for the ABC TV station there. And wrestling in this country, professional wrestling, is purely entertainment. There is serious wrestling on the college level or the Olympic level, and it is the most boring sport in the history of boringness, much less sport. So you couldn't sell 3 tickets to a real wrestling match. Sometimes it's over in 12 seconds. That would be one reason. And it's just not interesting. But those guys are stunt men who are brilliant at what they do, and people laugh at it. You know, there are also a few people, I guess, who believe it, but we must remember them in our prayers.
You first experimented with this format for The Tonight Show. Did you have any idea it was going to be so enduring?
Not the slightest, no. And to this day, I feel modesty is a little, that doesn't really address the reality I'm trying to convey here. I'm reluctant to take deep bows for having created The Tonight Show. I did, but that's like being complimented for having invented the paper clip. I will take a bow for having done the Meeting of Minds project. That was damn hard, and it took me 18 years to get it on, and that was a really important contribution. 1,000 years from now, people will be watching those discussions, in case they don't know what I'm talking about. Meeting of Minds, as you know, was a TV talk show in which all of the guests were important figures from history: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, people like that.
Mixed up together.
Yeah, all 3 and 4 at a time, and in serious discussions. It was not a comedy show. So I'll take bows for that. But for inventing The Tonight Show, I figure, honestly, that 1,000,000 years ago, there must have been some guy sitting in a forest on a tree stump and 2 buddies sitting on a log, And one said, "Hey, Og, how's it going? The fish jumping?" Oh yeah, I caught one the last moon. Well, I guess I'll be moseying on back to the cave now. That's all there is to a talk show. I'm serious. Now, if later somebody wants to get up and tap dance or something, that's a little extra, but the tap dancing is not the talk show element. So why should I run for governor just because I started talking to people on TV?
Some of the things that you did in your comedy show also endured through Laugh-In and Saturday Night Live, and also some of the things later Ernie Kovacs did in his all too short career in comedy. Can you see ahead at all to see what the format experiments of the future will be?
No one has ever been able to predict cultural innovations. Who could have predicted Elvis before he showed up? Nobody.
Or WrestleMania, for that matter.
WrestleMania. Who could have predicted the Beatles, the hula hoop, bossa nova, whatever it is? Suddenly there's a new thing, and people dig it, and it lasts for either 18 months or the next 400 years, whatever. The line on the charts are of different length. But predictions are meaningless, and that's why nobody ever makes them, I guess.
I wanted to ask you about your marriage to Jayne Meadows, which in a business.
Jayne, yes.
In a business like yours is really quite an accomplishment to have been married as long as you did. Somebody asked Johnny Cash about his marriage to June Carter and how that had managed to last, and what he said was, you just have to give the woman her own bathroom.
That's cute. It's funny, when I'm on stage doing comedy and people ask questions like this, I always go for a funny answer of one sort or another, but I guess you don't want that. I would advise the average man who wants to remain married for a long time to marry Jayne Meadows. Now, for most of you, that's ruled out, unless I drop dead Tuesday. But part of it is luck. Jayne always hates it when I say that. She wants me to get very philosophical and give warm advice and stuff.
Lots of compliments.
Well, I do compliment her. She is a remarkable woman. She is a superior human being. I've always felt, and I wrote this once somewhere, that she is wasted upon the world as the wife of a comedian, plus whatever else I am. She would have made a better first lady than any first lady we've actually had, and markedly better than some of them we could name. She is highly intelligent. I think she's the best actress in the country. We offered her all of the roles of women on the Meeting of Minds series. She turned me down 3 times, and in those 3 instances we did not get the performance we wanted, with all due respect to the lovely ladies who played the roles. But she played Marie Antoinette, Cleopatra, Florence Nightingale, and many others. So she's a fantastic woman, a great mother, great stepmother to my 3 older sons. And her superiority has a lot to do with the fact that we're together so long. But a word. Sometimes when you're talking about whoever, Roy and Dale or Steve and Jane or whatever, I think a lot of people whose marriages are in trouble think, well, boy, they must be wonderful people because Gus and I are getting divorced after 8 years. No, we may not even be as good as you and Gus, but marriage is tough. They got to get that over to 9-year-old people. Marriage is really tough. It's not then they lived happily ever after. Ever after they had moments of happiness and the moments of tears and moments of violent anger and all kinds of human problems. So I think we're going to have to begin training children, I recommend, I should say, that we begin training children for marriage starting at about the age of 5. We should also train them how to reason, but that's another discussion. The idea that you can just be thrown into the water and swim in marriage is leading to most marriages now ending up in divorce.
On that, I want to thank you, Steve Allen, for being a guest on Upon Reflection.
Thank you. If you were older than I was, you would have invented the talk show. You do this very well. Thank you, Marcia.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.